Hey folks, Dave Temple here. As you know, my podcast is all about talking to some of the best thriller writers in the world. But now, after nearly 2.5 years, I think it's time I toot my own horn. So with that, I'm offering my thriller, The Poser, for sale. This thriller stars Hollywood detective Patricia Pat Norelli, a rookie cop working the overnight beat when one of Hollywood's biggest stars is found dead in her Hollywood Hills home. The only problem, the star just won an Oscar and is found dead only hours later. Now, Pat sees this as a way to forge her own path and muscles her way into the case. Soon, she and partner Detective Stuart Brown find themselves deep inside a complex case with more questions than answers and a ghost of a killer. Now, this isn't my first self-published book, but it's the first one I'm very confident you're going to like. I'm pretty proud of it. And for the rest of this month, you can get the ebook for only $5.95 or the paperback for $13.95. Now, since I do this weekly podcast as a free service, perhaps you'd consider this a way to help out your fellow thriller author. Okay, here's the link, davidtemplebooks.com/books. Okay, there you'll see The Poser. Just click and you're on your way. Again, the link is davidtemplebooks.com/books. Otherwise, just head over to Amazon. Okay, thanks for your support. And now on with the show. Hello and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple, and we have a heck of a show for you today. I might say that every single time, but today I really mean it. I mean it every time. I really do. But today, as we kick off, it isn't the actual kickoff day, but as we launch our new year number 2, which is season 3, but I split the first year into 2 seasons, so now it's season 3 and we're kicking off year 2. You follow me, don't you? But today's show is a New York Times bestseller, a Wall Street Journal bestseller, 22 books to his credit, 21 superstar rock-solid hits, starring none other than that spy that we all love, Scot Harvath. Who is it? It's Brad Thor, and the book is Rising Tiger. We're going to talk about this cover, which is flat out gorgeous. But Brad Thor, no offense to anyone, anywhere, this is one of my favorite interviews so far. And really, I feel almost cheesy saying that because I love every single one of my interviews, and they're all fantastic. Whether you're a huge rock star or you're on the way up, I don't know what it was. You know, sometimes the planets are aligned, you call it, but the energy's there, the questions are good, the answers are fantastic. It's just rocking and rolling. And let's just say you are in for 59 and a half minutes of rock'em sock'em interview from a guy who's got energy, class, style. He's a tornado, man. He comes rushing in and you just want to get caught up in it. Why am I still talking? He's waiting in the green room. Ladies and gentlemen, right here on the Thriller Zone, please welcome Brad Thor.
Hello there.
You win the award for the most handsome background.
Yeah, my office. It's not bad. I never thought I'd be broadcasting from here, but here we are.
It is really luxuriously handsome. Is the whole motif that dark, or is it just kind of that sexy corner that you have going?
So there's 2 rooms. I'm at a desk that's got wheels on it. It's a standing desk.
Nice.
So I'm sitting in between 2 rooms. So this is, it's got a fireplace over here and a TV set and a couch. So this is kind of a reading/library, and then the work happens in the bigger room on the other side of this.
Very nice. Thank you.
Little Art Deco motif in your bar. That's super classy.
Yeah. Yep, it's a lot of fun right there.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You were a QVC hand model at one time, weren't you?
Look at me. I've done it so many times now, I can do it without even thinking. You have to train your mind, because what I'm seeing in the screen is the exact opposite of what my brain wants to do. You know?
Right.
Like, here's the book. There it is. It's hard. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate getting to do this with you.
Are you kidding me? This is like the biggest honor ever for me, so I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad. I always love talking thrillers with people. So this is cool. Tell me about your typewriter real quick before we dive in here, because I've got 2 vintage typewriters in my office. So what do you got over there under the window?
That is a Royal. And that
I've got a Royal. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that was my mother's.
Wow.
So back in the day when she was writing love letters to my dad, that was the thing that she wrote it on. And
That's
we have
amazing.
The hard pseudo leather case that it comes in. It's
2 pieces, right? It's the base and then the lid that comes over the top. Yeah. That's cool. Well, me and Tom Hanks, we're into collecting we like our typewriters.
Boy, I saw a Tom Hanks collection. Yeah, I have 2, that and an old IBM Selectric, but Tom has like an entire room dedicated to it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's always funny. I like to find out what the boys collect as toys. You got your Jack Cars, who it's all ammunition, weapons, and so forth. Then you got the guys who go, fine pens, exquisite watches, typewriters.
Yep.
I think you're right in the middle of that, though, aren't you? Because
I've got lots of guns and ammo. I got lots of terrific pens. I'm a big watch guy, and I love my typewriters. Yeah.
All right. Here's a cool thing. I think you are the first New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author ever on the show. So,
wow.
Welcome. Wow. Thank you.
How about that? Yeah. My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
As we are celebrating, we just launched year number 2, so you're right there at the head of the kickoff.
Wow. Congratulations. That's great.
And we're going to get to this beautiful book, Rising Tiger, a hell of a read, Brad, in just a couple of minutes. And I'm going to talk about this probably later. Anybody who listens to this show, I'm a freak for covers, and you are now officially in my book of top 5 book covers of 2022.
Wow. Well, thank you. And can I tell you a little something about that while you have it in your hand?
Please do. It's so handsome.
Thank you. I got to work with the art director from the jump on this one, which is great. And he said, well, what are you thinking? And I told him where the story was going to be set. And I said, there are these 2 beautiful, huge brass doors at the city palace of Jaipur in India. And I would love to use that as a background, and we'll build out from there. So the doors were my idea. Everything else is Jimmy's. Jimmy did a great job. But if you you can braille that book, and you can feel what the doors at the city palace in Jaipur, India feel like. So they have embossed the book with the exact details that are at the palace in Jaipur, which is really cool. Plus the difference, the transition into the tiger's head, where you don't have the brailing ability there. It's fabulous. The guy did a great job.
When I very first glanced at it, I thought, oh, look, it's a surface has been torn away. At just quick glance, I'm like, oh, torn away. And then I went, oh, no, idiot. That's a tiger. Hello. I mean,
by the way, and so you're never going to see me do the paper tear. That is such a hackneyed, overdone, so old. I mean, that's like 1990s kind of a thing, like mid 90s. Or maybe that's a little too early, but maybe not mid 90s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with this. And again, I picked the doors. Everything else is Jimmy, the art director at Emily Bestler Books. And Jimmy is he's a brilliant, brilliant artist. So.
And what's super cool is, and I just saw this on your website, is you're giving away challenge coins that look exactly like this all through the month. Yeah, that is so.
Cover on one side, and then the back side is actually the artwork from my very first thriller, The Lions of Lucerne. So that's the lion's head with the American flag in its mouth.
Wow.
Fun stuff.
So much to cover here. And I want to be super respectful of your time, so I'm going to squeeze it all in. Let's talk books. Were books always a part of your childhood? Were you always a big reader from way back?
Yep. So I got to tell you, when I read the book Freakonomics as a young adult, I really was blown away by one big thing in Freakonomics. It's that I grew up hearing, and you probably did too, that if you want your children to be readers, you should read to them, that's the key to making them big readers. That's actually not what they found when they looked at studies and covered that particular kind of myth in Freakonomics. What they found is if you want your children to be great readers, you need to have books in your home, and they need to see you reading. It is a behavior that your children will copy if they see you doing it. So my parents were huge readers, huge, and thriller readers. That's what they read. They read Clancy, Cussler, Le Carre, Freddie Forsyth, and on and on and on. And I probably, I went right from the Hardy Boys books to picking up their very adult books, Ludlum and things like this, that I probably shouldn't have been reading at that young age. But it was an addiction. The minute one would get put down, next to the hammock or whatever, and I could tell that the bookmark was out of it. That was always the indication that one of my parents had finished the book. It didn't have a bookmark in it. I'd grab it and I would read it. So yeah, you can't be a writer, David, without even being a halfway decent reader. It is an absolute prerequisite.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's funny that you mentioned that point about watching, because where I picked up my reading is because my mom was always sitting around the house reading, and she was she would read a book a day. I don't know how she did it. I can do it in 2 now, but not in 1. And so I grew up around that, and I'm like, well, that's if my mom and dad are reading, I'm going to read too. And so very similar. And do you have a favorite, like you mentioned, Hardy Boys? Do you have a favorite that stands out? When I read this as a kid, that's when I whoa, maybe I could do this.
You know what? It's funny. It wasn't a book that did it for me. It's the Hardy Boys. I read all of the Black Stallion books. That was a big deal. And I remember the Scholastic Book Club, where we would get the paper catalog and you could bring it home. The teachers normally gave it to us on a Friday, so we'd have time to pick out our books and get the check. The money. Actually, sometimes my mom would give me an envelope, and it'd have X amount of dollars and coins in there and that kind of a thing. You'd go home, and then there was that strip on the back, the order strip, and you would cut it out with a pair of scissors. You'd write your name in there and what you wanted, and you'd have to bring the money in for the teacher. And I always had that thing loaded up. That was the one thing my parents never denied us, was books. And I kept doing that with my kids. It's funny, somebody got very savvy. Our local bookstore in Chicago was a Barnes & Noble that was right around the corner from us. And my son got wise to this very fast, that I would always buy books. And some savvy book publisher would do these great books, but there'd be a toy packaged with the book, so there'd be a little fire truck or a police cruiser or whatever. And so my son found a way to get a little toy and a book every time we went to the local B&N.
Smart kid.
Yeah, smart guy.
We only have about a decade between us, and by your looks, it's obvious you're the younger one. But were you like me growing up, that when you just set because I've watched your career over the years, and were you like me? Did you set your eyes on a goal and your mind to a task and said, that right there, that's what I want and that's what I'm going for? Because it looks that your career has been indicative of that.
No. What's interesting is my second semester junior year, I studied abroad in Paris. And I took with me, my mom was an executive recruiter, and she was working for a publishing company called Nightingale Conant. And they did a lot of books on tape and things like this. And my mom gave me, she got this stuff because they were a client. And so I took with me books on tape. So they were cassette tapes. I took one, and I forget the author's name. It was one book on negotiating on tape. And then the other one was a Tony Robbins course. And I listened to those because I didn't have a TV in my room. I could listen to French radio and things like that. But that was my entertainment in addition to reading books. So I read this, listened to this whole Tony Robbins. I don't know if it was Awaken the Giant Within or which one it was at that time. But for anybody who knows, I can't believe there's a single person listening to this that hasn't seen like a late night Tony Robbins commercial like he used to do, or see him on YouTube or something. But Tony Robbins had a big thing about, if you sow the same seed, you'll very likely reap the same rewards. Success leaves clues, study success. So back to Paris, I made a good friend in Paris, and actually that's who Rising Tiger is dedicated. She passed away in the fall. I lost my mom and this woman who was like my second mom just this past fall. And so I became good friends with this woman, Jill. She was delightful. Her kids were wonderful. She was a single mom, and we were just really good friends. She's British. She had married a French guy, was divorced, and we talk about books and movies and all this kind of stuff. anyway, when I graduated from the University of Southern California, Jill had invited me. She said, I've got an extra room here in Paris. You keep talking about writing. If you want to come and stay here and take a crack at writing your first novel, come do it. And so I did. I'd been saving money while I was in college. I was leasing apartments in LA, and I went and I got a couple of chapters into a thriller. But David, I had this voice in the back of my head that I think a lot of us do that say, you know what? What if it's a failure? What if you write a crappy book? What if it doesn't get published? Don't risk the embarrassment. Better to quit than to be embarrassed. And I gave into that voice. I really now believe that which we're most destined to do in life, we're often most afraid of. And we're afraid of failure. But years later, when I was on my honeymoon, my wife asked me, what would you regret on your deathbed never having done? And I said, writing a book and getting it published. And she said, okay. I was a travel show host at the time. I had a show called Traveling Light on public television. And she said, when we get home, you need to start taking 2 hours a day, protected time, make that dream come true. And I did. And now this is my 21st with Harvath as a protagonist, 22nd overall. And I just felt with losing Jill last fall, she and my mom both went the same way. They both had dementia. So it wasn't COVID related. It was dementia. But I just felt like, I dedicated a book to my mom years and years ago. And I thought my second mom just passed. And I really owe her for allowing me to kind of begin trying my hand at writing. So that's why she's the person I dedicated Rising Tiger to.
That is a fantastic story, and a little piece of that I was going to share later because it was going to be one of those things that you and I have in common, and that is both of our wives have said at one time to us, if this was it, if you had a year to live, if you were going to die soon, that kind of a thing, if you could do something for the next year, what would it be? Mm-hmm. And this happened with us when we were living in New York City, and I said, write a book. And she said, starting tomorrow, I'll sit down, get at it, and carve out some time. And so when I read that story about you, I'm like, oh my God, who gets this opportunity in life when you have a partner in life who says, look, I know how important this is to you. So sit down, do it. And I've got your back. I got you covered. You can pay back later by making it successful, right? So
right. And you can't chicken out because you're a man and you've told your wife, this is my deepest desire. I joked that my man card was on the table and I didn't want to see it get dropped into the shredder. So I had to do it. But it is, all kidding aside, it is and you realize that as well. It is with that kind of support from your spouse. I mean, that's an amazing thing to have somebody say, I got your back, go do it. I'm going to make sure you're protected and you can get this done.
Yeah. Yeah, the man card. I like that a little addition because if you drop the ball, it's all on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, speaking of this, and you held up the coin and made me think of this. Here's the crazy thing to me as it pertains to your prolific career. I mean, your first big hit, 2002, and I'm sitting there, Lions of Lucerne. I'm thinking to myself, that's only 20 years ago. And when I say that phrase, I'm like, that sounds like a long stretch, but it doesn't really seem that far. But look at you, and correct me if I'm wrong, one great monster hit after another every single year since, right?
Yeah, I mean, I made a bestseller list with Lions, but it was not the New York Times list. It wasn't USA Today. It wasn't one of the big, huge lists. I think I made a regional list or something like that, and then we just built from there. Let's see. So I think if I remember correctly, it was my fourth book. I'm looking at them off to the side here. My fourth book, Blowback. I'd have to crawl deeper into my office. I have like the way people frame records. I've got the lists and the book covers. But I remember I was, where was it? Kansas, I believe. And I was on book tour and my editor called me and said, I've got great news. You hit the New York Times list. And I can't remember what the order was, but I'd hit the New York Times list for paperback with my book Blowback. And I was like, oh, that's great. She's like, you're a New York Times bestseller now, blah, 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 blah. And we talked and hung up. Then she called me back. She goes, oh my God, I didn't even read the rest of the list. You also hit it in hardcover for your most recent book, Takedown. So when I hit the New York Times list, I hit it in paperback and hardcover, two different books. And so that was fourth and fifth book for me. So yeah, that's how it happened.
And that is no easy feat. This does not, I'm learning more and more, having interviewed some pretty sizable authors in my day here. And the the end all is that New York Times bestseller list, I think anyway. And I always thought, oh, well, if you just sell a buttload of books, you'll make it. But it's way harder than that, isn't it? I mean,
there's a lot. As you and I are recording this, I've got one eye looking over my shoulder at Ellen Hildebrand because she came out last month with, I'm not going to even mention the title because I'm trying. I don't want to spoil anything. But anyway, she's got a very. I hear she is just the loveliest woman. She's got a great, loveliest person. She's just a great author, and she's got a huge fan base. She's doing extremely well with her new book. So, and it's really caught fire. So I'm kind of watching, going, wonder what's going on, because next week we'll see first week sales for Rising Tiger, and I'm still competitive, David. Yeah. You know, I still. It's funny. Several years ago, I got number 2 on the list, and somebody that works with me, she's like, so you didn't get number 1. What's the big deal? And I'm like, well, and she goes, listen, if I had come to you when you were a creative writing student at the University of Southern California and told you would be in a neck and neck horse race with James Patterson, co-writing with an ex-US president, a thriller, and they would take number 1, they would edge you out, they'd get number 1, and you get number 2, what would you say? And I'd say, oh my God, dream come true, be fabulous. She goes, okay, have that gratitude that you would have. And I was like, you know what? That's a really great way to look at it. It's good to be competitive. I think being competitive is healthy. I think it makes me work hard, pay attention to details, take care of my customers because they're my employers. I always tell people, I don't work for the publisher. I work for the readers. They're my bosses. And so when you talk about me giving away challenge coins on Facebook and stuff like that on social media, it's because I'm always trying to find ways to say thank you to the people that make this incredible career possible.
Well, and it's obvious, and I forgot the second part of that question, which was, as I set up all these accolades, is what do you think, Brad, yourself? And this varies differently from what I'm going to ask you in a couple of minutes, but what do you think is your secret sauce? What's that thing that just makes every book just kind of a hit?
Well, I know there's some hallmarks of what I do. There's not a formula, but it's the action starts on page 1 is a big thing. I think that's really important. I always love that, how the Bond movies didn't have a slow build. They dropped you right in the middle of an ongoing assignment and bam, you were slammed right into the action. Yeah. I love that. But what I do faction, David, where you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins. Yeah. So I like to take a big geopolitical set piece and look at how could this potentially be a problem for the United States? And then my protagonist, Harvath, is the solution to that problem. And I put him in there. Years ago, I started going to a much shorter chapter format. So you get these short, crisp, cinematic chapters. If you compare Rising Tiger to Lions of Lucerne, you're going to find I do in 3 to 4 chapters today what I used to do in one longer chapter back then. And that's just a reflection of the times we live in. People have shorter attention spans, and it's tough. It takes a lot of discipline to finish a book. But what I found is that by breaking the chapters down and making them shorter, people get a sense of accomplishment. I read oh gosh. And then I leave each chapter with a little bit of a cliffhanger that makes you want to get into the next one. Yeah. So, but I do think it's the faction component. I think that's what people enjoy. They get a great white knuckle thrill ride. But when you close one of my books, the icing on the cake for me is if you know a little bit more than when you started. You're a little bit smarter for having read the book. It's not a training manual. It is pure entertainment. But there's enough stuff that's in there that people go, oh my God, I actually read your books with my phone out or my laptop open because I want to Google, because I can't believe the things you're talking about are true. And then I say, oh my God, they're true. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I love about it is that you start off with a rocket and you end with a little hook. And I've noticed that that has been a seismic shift over the last couple of decades. And when you compare those two books, it is exactly what you said. But you find yourself, especially with white space and the way that our eyes are following and moving faster. My question that was curious about, and you're one step ahead of me, is that do you think our attention spans have shortened? And do you think that's indicative of why you think this 500, 600, 700 page Stephen King notwithstanding, is falling away?
Cocaine's a hell of a drug. Hell of a drug. I know he doesn't do cocaine anymore, but boy, he used to. He admits so. That's how he was able to. Part of being very prolific was the Bolivian marching powder. I do think so. I think discipline is one thing, as we talked about. It takes a lot of self-discipline to finish a novel. Attention span, sure. I think we've been so trained by social media. Before the internet really exploded, my brother-in-law used to have a great line because my sister-in-law used to get ticked that he was always pushing the button on the TV remote. And she'd get pissed that he wouldn't stay on anything. He's like, honey, it's not about what's on. It's about what else is on. Right. And he would just keep dialing around. So I think that we do have a shorter attention span. And listen, what I do is it's show and it's business, right? So I've got to have, you have to have a good marketing team, good sales team, all of which I have, fabulous publicity people. But you have to think about the end user. And one of the things, I'm like a broken record at Simon & Schuster, where I said, I get it. You people are they're all massive book lovers. They're smart business people, but they're all massive book lovers as well, as am I. We're all big readers. And sometimes I have to bring a discussion back to like, listen, this is no different than if we're selling bicycles, butter, or doorbells. It is a business. And they all say, yes, you're exactly right. And I said, so for a second, we have to step away from our love of just reading and of books and say, how do we reach the consumer? And they're like, oh, no, absolutely. So I never fight over this kind of stuff with my publisher. They get it. But there are times where I'm like just merciless with treating it as a product and not a work of art. Because my big thing, David, is it's what, $28-$30 for a hardcover, $15 for a digital copy for an ebook. And so if you buy one of my books, you can go back to work and make more money to buy another book. If you don't like it and you end up throwing it out, you can go make, spend a couple hours at work and make the money to buy another book. What you can't make more of is your time. That's a finite commodity. So it is incumbent upon me to give you the best, again, white knuckle thrill ride I'm capable of, because you have entrusted me with the most valuable resource you have. So your time could have been spent with your family, could have been spent on furthering your own career, pursuing another hobby outside of reading that you love. It could be your health. Maybe you go to the gym. So that is really, I always feel the weight of that more than I do the dollars. And that really drives me to be the best and to keep raising the bar every year. I spend a lot of time in the off season reading books on writing, believe it or not. I'm 22 books in. This doesn't get any easier. My job gets harder because I raise the bar for myself. Now, do readers notice? Like, do you notice the changes I've made between this book and last year's book? Maybe not. And you shouldn't. It shouldn't be that radically different. I want you to have that Brad Thor experience. But behind the scenes, I'm trying to, if I'm the king of baked Alaska, or I don't know, some potato souffle or whatever, I want to keep tweaking the recipe to give you a better one, not different, but better. Because Vince Flynn, before he passed way too soon, Vince had done an article, I think it was with the Objectivist Center. It was a magazine, and my mom had handed it to me. She's like, oh, Vince is in this interviewed in this magazine. And one of the things Vince said is, he's like, if you're batting 300 and you know you're going to go to the Hall of Fame, why would you start changing up your swing? Why would you start working on the swing? And so that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to radically change it, but I also believe that being an author is one of these careers where you can constantly better yourself through reading other people and through reading books on writing. Just my opinion.
This is a great point to interject something I was going to do later. I ran a quick poll on Twitter right before I started our recording, and I was just curious, any of my followers have a question for you that they'd like to ask? And I've got one from Eric Bishop in North Carolina. He says, you came into prominence about the same time as Vince Flynn. You both share the same publisher, and you both have iconic character audiences love. His question, do you have a story of an interaction with Vince that personifies who he was as a writer?
I met Vince for lunch in Minneapolis one time. I was on a book tour there. Vince was very nice, just a super, super nice guy, because he gave me a blurb for my very first book, For the Lions of Lucerne. I had been traveling. It was on my honeymoon. My wife and I, after I told my wife that I wanted to write a book and get it published and had decided I was going to do it, we had an overnight train ride from Munich to Amsterdam. And we shared it with a young brother and sister from Georgia. And she was a sales rep for Simon & Schuster. And she said, we've got this exciting new author. You've got to read him. You might be able to find him in an English bookstore while you're traveling. And his name is Vince Flynn. He wrote this book called Term Limits. And it was this sales rep for Simon & Schuster. When we pulled into Amsterdam, she knew me from my TV show. She and her brother were big travelers. They always took trips to Europe whenever they could. And she had said, what are you doing when you get home? Are you making more episodes of your TV show? And I said, I've actually decided I'm going to write a manuscript. I've always wanted to do a thriller. And she gave me her business card and said, if you get it written, I'd love to read it. And if I could help you at Simon & Schuster. So that's how how I ended up. Vince was there first. Vince was with Emily Bessler at Simon & Schuster. And this sales rep, Cindy Jackson, got my manuscript to Emily Bessler at Simon & Schuster. And I remember going out for drinks to celebrate signing with Simon & Schuster. And Emily said, I got to be honest with you, I didn't know what to think. We normally don't get manuscripts handed to us from people on the sales force. She said, but I read Lions of Lucerne. It was the best 3 days I've had. I loved reading it. I wish I could have sat and read it in one sitting, but it was right around Christmas time. So she was going crazy. And she called me like the day before Christmas and said, we'd like to have you be an author here. So, but back to Minneapolis, listen, Vince was just always a very charming, very funny guy. And so I remember, and he was beloved by everybody. Everybody who met Vince loved him. So Eric Bishop, great question, but I'll never forget. We met for lunch. Vince said, I got a real cool place next to your hotel. And it was this fun, really nice, new chic restaurant and everything. And it came time to pay the bill. And I got out my wallet to try to pay. He's like, no, this is for us, and the publisher's going to pay for it. And I didn't know that the publisher, when you go on book tour, will issue you a credit card for incidentals. And I said, where'd you get that? He goes, you'll eventually get one for incidentals while you're on book tour. And I said, but you're not on tour. He goes, don't worry, I make them enough money that they can pay for lunch today. And it was really, so he's just such a charming guy. Always had fun stories. I think it was the Irish in him that he was a natural born storyteller and very, very charming. So not a specific story that kind of him as a writer, because we didn't talk about writing that much. We talked about the business of writing and publishing, which is what I really enjoyed about him. He's a very smart guy when it came, and he was self-published to start. He was a hustler like Grisham, going around, with his books, getting people to buy his books and everything. So he was self-published before he got picked up at Simon & Schuster. A real good salesman.
Wow.
And a good human being.
Yeah. Gone too soon.
Way too soon.
Ripped through all of his books early on. But I want to go back to your creative writing days at USC. And what was studying under the tutelage of T.C. Boyle like?
He was amazing. I just got to host Tom for the Miami Book Fair and interview him about his most recent book. And he's a character. He's got this wild hair, and he wore an ear cuff, which was a wild piece of jewelry. And he's just super smart. And we used to tease him because he was like the David Hasselhoff of writers, because he sold like unbelievably in Germany, just like Hasselhoff is like huge in Germany. Yeah. And he's just a charming, decent, super smart guy that had so much wisdom. How can you not respect somebody who is that successful of an author who wants to come and run the creative writing department at a major university? This is somebody who wants to give back. And we've stayed in touch all these years later. He's just a super, super guy. But outside of Tom's control at USC, one of my biggest complaints is we did the components of writing. This is how you write a chapter, blah, blah, blah. But we never learned how to read a royalty statement. It would have been fun to have a business side of this is how you get a publisher. This is how you get an agent. Let's talk about query letters. We never got into the business side of it. It was all the art side. But I suppose there's probably not a lot of people that go through the creative writing process that end up becoming, published authors and can make a living at it. So I would assume that's why that's not a huge part of the curriculum, or at least it wasn't when I was there. But
yeah, and I've had some guests on who have gone on to get their master's degree in creative writing and such. And I don't get that. I was going to ask you what you thought about that. No. Listen,
I wish I had a great singing voice. I love Nat King Cole. I wish I could sing like that. And guess what? No matter how many voice lessons I take, I am never going to be a good singer. You either have it or you don't have it. And I think it's the same thing with writing. I think either you can write a gripping novel. And I always tell people the key is, let me back up to Stephen King. Stephen King, in his fabulous book about writing called On Writing, said that you should write what you love to read, because that's where your passion is. And I always tell people that line, and then I add, you also already have a mini PhD in that genre. You know why you loved 6 books by, like for me, let's just pull somebody like Clancy. I know why I love these 6 books, but the 7th book was a clunker. And here's why. And I'm not saying Clancy's 7th book was a clunker.
Right.
I'm just using him as an example.
Right.
So going through a master's degree, I guess if you want to teach, I'm not saying master's degrees are worthless. You want to get an MFA, great, go do it, and more power to you, and God love you. But if you want to become an author, I never saw the value of getting a master's degree. For me, it was a matter of, seat of pants, a seat of chair. And as Jack London said, you can't wait for inspiration. You have to go after it with a club. And that's just what you have to do. It's all discipline. It's discipline to read, and it's discipline to write.
Yeah. I wish you had given this some thought, Brad. I mean, you really were pulling for some ideas.
Not passionate. No, exactly.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to find out something very interesting. In my entire radio career, I have never interviewed a person like Brad who's going to be able to answer this. Stay with us. David Temple here for the Thriller Zone, and I want to say a very big, warm welcome to Warwick's Bookstores. They're based in La Jolla, California. They are a family-run bookstore, unlike any I've seen maybe ever. Talking about customer service, quality products, vast array of books, including autograph books. I mean, they really have it all. My single favorite thing, and it's the one thing that is lacking in today's society, in my opinion, exceptional customer service. How often do you get to say, hey, I went to shopping at so-and-so. Their customer service is amazing. That's what you're going to find at Warwick's Bookstore. Now, if you're not in the San Diego area, you can, of course, shop for them online at warwicks.com. Warwick's is the country's oldest continuously family-owned and operated bookstore. You're thinking, well, that can't be true. That's got to be oodles of them. Only one. Oh, one of my favorite things, they have signed book author events. This is where I discovered in person Don Winslow, Jack Carr, Meg Gardner. These big authors that we admire so much share their story, read from their books. You can get autographed copies right there. You want to shop for a gift? And you can do it online. That's what I'm talking about. You can actually go to their website, warwicks.com. I can't say enough nice about them. And of course, thank you, Warwicks, for believing in this show and being one of our prime sponsors.
Hey there, I'm Brad Thor. I am the author of the new thriller Rising Tiger, and I'm hanging out in the Thriller Zone with my friend David Temple.
Have you ever heard the phrase, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results? You ever done that? Oh man, I have. There's one way in particular that this rings true. I used to build my own websites. I used to build them for other people too, professionally, but I built them for myself. The problem with doing things yourself when it's not your absolute center of forte is that you're never happy. And you know what happens when you're never happy? You keep tweaking. It never really gets finished. And on top of that, you ever heard this phrase? The cobbler never has time to repair his own children's shoes. So mixing those two together, sometimes when you're stacked up with other people's business, you kind of neglect your own. Thank goodness I found the company AuthorBytes.com. Why is that? AuthorBytes.com is a website host and developer specifically for authors. Now, you can be a big-time author or you can be an up-and-coming, right? The thing is, you got to dedicate the time to doing something right. And sometimes you just don't have the time or the expertise. And so the insanity comes in when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, but while you're expecting different results, they don't really come. Go to AuthorBytes.com. They're going to consult with you. They're going to design the website. And then the best part, they do all the heavy lifting. They take care of the security, all the stuff that might keep you up late at night, they take care of. And if you use the code The Thriller Zone, they'll give you 3 months free with a 1-year contract. Crazy, right? AuthorBytes.com. Use the code The Thriller Zone and stop the insanity. And we are back with the Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple. Brad Thor is my guest. The book is Rising Tiger. It's a hell of a read. It's beautiful. We're going to talk about that. But as I said just before the break, in my entire radio career, which is about 26 years, in working 5 of the top 10 markets and on Westwood One Radio and Armed Forces Radio Network, you're the first person in all that time that I've interviewed that did this one thing, and that is announce their candidacy for president of the United States. And I, of course, I knew this, and I'm like, wow. And I'm like, what would be that one question you wanted to ask? Do you ever look back and wonder, what if I had run and won?
No, it was the way the country is structured, the way the two-party system is structured, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. I'm the son of a United States Marine. We were taught growing up that we don't own this country. We're merely stewards of the Republic, and it's incumbent upon us to hand to the next generation a freer, more successful, more prosperous, more secure nation. So I was very concerned with the direction that politics was going, and I wanted to throw my hat in the ring to actually just get to the debate stage, because I wanted to bring up these issues on the debate stage. And then I realized, I'm like, I left the particular party that I had been aligned with my whole adult life. I bailed out, and I was just like, no, I'm going full independent, and that's it. And I'm out. So,
well, I've caught a couple of your appearances on television, and you are well spoken. You're well thought out. You know what you're talking about, and that right there is impressive enough. But I could see how that is a soup that one may not want to swim in, because I don't know. I want to be real careful, because I don't spend a lot of time with politics or religion on the show for all obvious reasons. And
yeah, it's very divisive, especially right now.
So I don't really want to go there, but I did hear you made a comment about one of our former presidents that we'll leave it at that, and you weren't exactly in agreement. And
this wasn't my porn star comment, was it?
No, but I would love to hear that one.
I happen to say that a particular person in politics had more positions than a porn star. This was in the primary stage. I said that to my friend Megyn Kelly, and she had to pause. It was funny because I was doing it I don't like the monitor going when I'm doing a remote. And so I asked him to turn it off because there's a lag. You can hear in the you can hear in your ear what's being said in real time, but there's a video. So I turned it off. So what I didn't realize till I got home from the studio, the remote studio, and watched it, was that Megyn Kelly put her hand up to the camera. It was like, wait, I have to recover from that. And then she was like, whoa, okay. So sorry, I didn't mean to step on your whatever it was you were going to go to there, David.
No, I'm going to leave it alone at you're saying no. All right, I'm going to go back for one more writing question, because you said something, I thought, Brad Thor said that. Do you ever find yourself worrying, getting sweaty palms, that sense of, wait, what if my creative stream dries up and or people don't like my books anymore? And on the flip side, what's your favorite part of your writing career? So it's kind of a two-headed beast.
Yeah. So, the challenge is I do a book a year, and quality is really, really important for me. I am incapable of phoning it in. Yeah. So to top myself in the sense of I'm doing something I haven't done in another book, and I'm raising, we talked earlier about, I raise that bar, even if it's just by a millimeter, the reader might not notice, but I notice, because I'm trying to get better and to give a better book every single year. So the concern is, well, what am I going to do for next year? Because retailers now would like you to start announcing earlier. It's like Christmas coming earlier and everything. Get that book online, start gathering those pre-orders and all that kind of stuff. So it's pressure enough to do. I love deadlines. They make the most beautiful sound as they go racing past. It's the old joke. So, but I still, people build their vacations around my books. So there is a pressure to come out end of June, beginning of July. And that's what I'm contracted with the publisher for. So what's next year's idea going to be? And so the more pressure that comes, the less you're able to kind of allow things to happen organically. But my agent asked me, she said, well, what would you think if we next time negotiated that you come out every 18 months? I'm like, no, I know what it's like to count on authors I love as a reader, and I want those books out every year. And I said, I wouldn't do anything but procrastinate with that extra 6 months anyway. It's not going to take any of the stress off. I would just blow 6 months. I mean, you want to see the cleanest desk, the cleanest garage, the cleanest closets. It's somebody that's under a deadline, particularly writers. So that's more of where my stress comes from. I'm not worried about other things. It's about how do I get the next big cool idea? And it happens. It's just I have to marinate in the news and all that kind of stuff. So that's that. The part that I love the most and that I've had to draw down on because we have an immunocompromised person in our family is the actual in-person touring. So COVID has really I've been able to do virtual stuff and that kind of a thing, but it's no substitute for being out there and shaking hands and taking pictures and that kind of stuff, because I like to get out and meet readers. That's my favorite part of the whole thing. And so that's been denied to me. But I get to do this. I get to have some human interaction by doing interviews like this. And thank God we've got this technology. I don't know what we would have done 20 years ago.
We wouldn't have. That's pretty much. And you know what? One thing I really like about your story, and I got to do this as a side note, is that, and I was studying this paragraph after paragraph, is how much information you jam in. This is just a statement, not a question. How much you jam into a paragraph. And I will often, I'll sit and I'll highlight and put notes in here because I love to study the craft of it and just go, all right, how does he do that? He keeps it interesting. He keeps it moving. He's shoving a lot of information in. I heard this great quote where someone said, I think it was Don Winslow said, every word has to pay rent. And I'm like, every word's paying rent right here. I mean, there's nothing wasted.
Elmore Leonard said the two best pieces of advice he could give young writers is, number one, don't ever start with the weather. It was a dark and stormy night. Don't do that. And number two, leave out the parts that people skip. This comes back to me being a young reader reading Clancy. My dad used to joke that he was convinced Clancy got paid by the word because there was so much stuff in there that didn't need to be in there. And I would skip parts in Clancy. I don't need to know how a missile guidance system works. I just need to know that there's a couple of, green berets that are shining a laser on a house, and the Hellfire missile is going to find it. The laser can't be seen by the human eye, and the missile is going to hit the house and kill the bad guys inside. That's all I need to know. I don't want to know about the gyroscope that helps it stabilize or what kind of fuel powers it. And I might talk about how fast it's moving through the air, but that's it. So again, Elmore Leonard, leave out the parts that people skip. That's a real big thing when you're writing, particularly a thriller. The details are the bedrock of it, but you have to be very judicious with what you put in. So Winslow's right about every word's got to pay rent. That's a great term.
Yeah. I've learned so much hanging out with him. Yeah. We've got to get to the book, of course. I find myself jammed with all these questions. I'm going to squeeze one more question in here, and that is this, because for whatever reason, us writers love to know, I don't know why, we love to know the pattern behind the process. So I'm going to ask, what's kind of your daily process? I'm curious myself. I know a lot of my listeners are, early riser, night owl, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or a word count.
So first of all, I am not an early riser, but I do force myself to get up. It's kind of that Jocko Willink thing. I'm not doing 4 a.m. like Jocko does, but by nature, I am not an early riser, but I get up because I got, kids to get off to school. I want to see them and all that kind of stuff. But I get up, see the kids, get them off to school, work out, get into the office. But I got to be honest, I'm doing anything but writing till about 3 p.m. It's not till later in the day that and I don't know if that's because it's the pressure, and I know that, I'd like to be home with my family for dinner. But it really doesn't kick in for me. I'll be reading articles on the internet, listening to podcasts and stuff like that. It gets to the point where I'm getting closer and closer to the deadline, and I've got to unplug my Wi-Fi because it's just, that's part of how I have to, focus on getting the stuff done. But I'm very much a night owl. I can spend, and there's nights where my kids will bring me, a dinner covered with foil and bring it over to my office above the garage, and I'll eat at my desk and that kind of a thing. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for bearing with me on that. All right. We talked about this. Beautiful cover. I'm going to do this. I'm going to start and let you finish this so I don't have to go into great detail or spoil anything. So Scot Harvath is in a jam, maybe his worst ever. And this time his mission is?
His mission is to track down who killed what I call a shadow diplomat in India, an American diplomat that was sent on a secret mission to India. In real life, the big geopolitical set piece for me, David, in coming up with the idea for Rising Tiger was 2 summers ago. A group of Chinese soldiers crept through the Himalayas into this disputed border area with India. And since 1996, no firearms have been allowed in this area so that things don't spiral out of control and into war. And the Chinese soldiers came in. It looked like something out of Walking Dead. They had made improvised weapons that they brought with them, iron rods studded with spikes, baseball bats wrapped with barbed wire. And there was this 6-hour hand-to-hand combat, throwing people off 1,000-foot cliffs. I mean, it was brutal. It was bloody. It was barbaric. And I was fascinated by this. And I said, why am I not hearing more about this skirmish in the United States? And the more I dug into it, I said, wow, India is fascinating. I didn't know anything about it. I thought, wouldn't it be cool for a story to say America wants to set up an Asian version of NATO? The Chinese would lose their minds over something like that, and they'd want to stop it because India, while the United States is the world's oldest democracy, India is its biggest. So we're a natural ally and partner with India, and the idea that the U.S. would try to get something off the ground and the Chinese would be picking off U.S. diplomats and causing trouble for India as well. And Harvath's got to go over and get to the bottom of what's going on so that these talks don't get derailed and this alliance can be birthed, if you will.
Well, and the thing I love about Scot is that, he's, you're going to get in the tightest situation ever and get out. You're going to have the best weapon and then lose the weapon and then figure out how to get through it. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that I always say, this is why I love reading thrillers, because, with this kind of a job and all the things that take our time, you want to escape, but you don't want to, I personally don't want to carve out just days because I got too much to do. And that's what books like yours enable me to do. Just get lost. Time flies. It's a rocking good time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
I do have this one question I'm curious about, because you have spent your entire career with Harvath. Do you find yourself ever going, what if there's somebody else up here in my head? What if maybe I have another hero that I could release to the world, even pen name or otherwise? Do you ever do that?
No, and here's why. Because originally I never intended to write a second book with Harvath. And I loved Michael Crichton, and I loved the idea of being able to pick up with a new cast of characters, a new protagonist with a different background, and exploring, what motivates people and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm just going to write different protagonists every time. And my editor, when she heard me say that, when I told her about what I wanted to do for my second book, she's like, do you understand the response that Scot Harvath has generated in the reading community? People want to go on an adventure with him again. You've got to write the new book with him. And she looked at me and she said, how many times have you gone into a bookstore, looked for your favorite author, and even if the book is set someplace that maybe is not, a part of the world that you're super excited about, but he's bringing back a character you love, you want to go on an adventure? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And she goes, you're going to disappoint people if you don't keep going with Harvath. She's like, trust me, you want to do this. And it was fabulous advice. So I don't harbor a desire to do, one year I did a second book about an all-female Delta Force team called the Athena Project. And that was a lot to write 2 books in 1 year, but I really had the burning desire to write that book. I've got another book in mind for the ladies of the Athena Project. So at some point I'd like to do that. But if I do anything, it's going to be a book that's a spinoff for The Troll, or I'm going to take Chase Palmer or Sloan Ashby, a couple of the younger members on Harvath's team, and maybe give them a book, sort of a thing. But I'm going to stay in this universe because I've watched people career-wise who are successful here, and they try to make a lateral move to like something different. It's like, you got a great steakhouse. Everybody loves it, but you've always dreamed of having an ice cream shop. Well, that skill and that success is not necessarily going to translate if you move over to the ice cream shop. I could stay as a thriller person. That's not the best example. I could write another thriller character, but I've just built this following, this audience. And again, they're my employers. They've been loyal to me for 20 plus years, and I want to return the favor. So as long as they keep reading, I'm going to keep giving them adventures with Scot Harvath.
Awesome. You couldn't ask for anything more. Okay. As we begin to wrap up, I do have this one final question. I ask all my authors this. It's pretty classic. but I love to hear the slight variation on the theme. And that is, if you were to offer a single piece of advice, especially to aspiring writers, which I happen to know a lot of my audience is, what would that be?
For aspiring writers. So this is the one that I love the best, and it's very niche. So, as people collect advice on writing, this is one I don't think anybody else is going to give you. And I hope that you keep it in your mind, aspiring writers. Agents are very, very important. Okay. Don't be discouraged if you get a couple of rejections. I've watched people turn to self-publishing so quickly. Stick with it, because the agents have the relationships with the editors and the big publishing houses and things like this. Here's the secret, though. Here's the piece of advice beyond stick with it, don't give up, is agents will tell you should only query one agent at a time. That's BS. That's a terrible piece of advice. As far as I know, Moses did not come down with a third tablet that has an 11th commandment that says only query one agent at a time. I tell people, if you submit to an agent and it takes that agent 3 months to get back to you, and you have to go through 12 agents before you find one, that's 3 years out of your life. I tell people, pick the 5 to 10 agents you think. I tell everybody, get the Writer's Digest Guide to Literary Agents, because that breaks down like an old-time phone book. It categorizes agents that are looking for the type of fiction or nonfiction, whatever it is you're writing. You can find agents that are open to submissions. Pick the 5 to 10 you like the best, that you think would be the greatest champions of your work, and submit simultaneously. Okay. Why should you be on their timetable? Put them on your timetable. Let them compete. And the the agent who likes you, who really sees value in your query letter and your submission, they get back to you. That's going to tell you a lot. But this one at a time stuff is invented by agents, and there's nothing that says you have to play by their rules. So don't make up your own rules.
Golf clap. Boy, I love that one, Brad. Oh my God. I have always wondered. I'm like, who came up with that rule, and why should I follow that? Exactly. And being a PK, I'm going to break every rule I possibly can anyway. But all right, if you ever watch the show, you know something called rapid fire questions. Sometimes they're rapid, sometimes they're not. Number one, you and the family are heading out for a long road trip. What is the music playing on the car stereo? It can be band or a genre.
Van Morrison.
Nice. Number two, your wife has told you, honey, go have fun. All guys weekend. You're in charge of planning. Get lost. It's an outdoor excursion, but the key is your mission. You're going to choose 3 or 4 thriller authors you'd like to hang out with for an entire weekend. Who would they be and why?
Well, I got to take guys that I'm already friends with. So it would be Jack Carr,
yep.
Kyle Mills, who writes the Vince Flynn books now, Steve Berry, who cheats at cards, but I still owe him money, and James Rollins.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to be a fly on that wall. All right. Number 3, what's the book or books currently sitting atop your TBR stack? And I'm thinking more for pleasure, less for work.
So right now I've got the top of my stack is Never by Ken Follett. And by the way, Ken Follett, Pillars of the Earth is my all-time favorite book, the best book I've ever read. Next, that's fiction. And if I had to read a book over and over again, nonfiction, it would be Eric Larson's In the Garden of Beasts about the rise of Hitler in 1930s Germany. It's perfect. It was edited by my editor's husband, and I always credit him. There's not a single spelling mistake, typo, grammatical error. And every time I say that to my editor, she said, he had a good copy editor. It wasn't my husband. So. Oh, and you know what? With authors, I'd also take my buddy Dan Brown, too.
Oh, okay.
I got to go back a question. Dan is a fascinating, fun guy to hang out with. So Dan would have to be there, too.
Golly, what a time. All right, fourth and final, my wife Tammy and I have invited you and your wife to a fancy dinner here at our home in San Diego to celebrate the new Scot Harvath TV series come to Netflix. I don't know if you knew this. They just bought it. It's fabulous. We've asked you to bring along 2 people with you. They can be living or past, but we want 2 more extra people to kind of round out the evening with engaging conversation. Who would those 2 people be and why?
No question. So first would be my buddy, Robert O'Brien, who is a lawyer in Southern California, who was the former national security advisor. And before that, he was the hostage czar, responsible for helping get Americans out of captivity and returned to the United States. Brilliant, smart, funny guy. I've known him since the LA riots. He was a neighbor of mine when I was in college. Brilliant guy. That'd be number one. Number two. All right. Number two would be a friend of mine up in LA as well, named Des Carey. Des is Irish. He was in the film finishing business, built a huge company called Light Iron, knows everybody, and has got he's an Irishman. He's got great stories to tell, whether it's about J.J. Abrams, who developed Alias and Lost, and he knows everybody in Hollywood, has nice things to say about everybody. And he will have us laughing before even the first course, and we'll walk out of there grateful that we got to break bread with Des Carey.
Man, great answer. Well, folks, to learn more about Brad and this fabulous book, Rising Tiger, visit bradthor.com. On Twitter, you can follow him as I do, at Brad Thor. On Instagram, Real Brad Thor. And on Facebook, Brad Thor Official. So you can get him all over the place, Mr. Social Media. I got to tell you, Brad, this was an honor and a pleasure. And I have this funny feeling we could have talked literally for hours. And thank you for the gift of your time.
Well, I appreciate it. And I do tons of interviews. And when I have somebody who's this generous and does their homework and is this much fun to do an interview with, the time just flies. So I thank you, David.
Thank you.
Did you live in Chicago when you were on the air in Chicago?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm from Chicago.
I know that. I almost brought that up. I lived right on Lakeshore, Diversey and Sheridan.
Sure.
And I was on WCLR, and then it became Big Mix 102.
Big Mix 102.
And then on WFYR, which was Fire 103, right before I got replaced by Mancow.
I'll never forget the time Mancow left me on hold and then ran out of time because he went long talking about magic mushrooms. The guy I missed was Brandmeier. Brandmeier did
Johnny B.
Johnny B.
Whatever happened to him?
You know what? My wife and I were wondering. We live in Nashville now, so we're out of that. We've been down here 8 years. I don't know where he is, but I remember when he was like filling in for Arsenio Hall and things like that. I mean, there was a guy that really had a bright future in TV, I guess, if he wanted it. Super funny, great mornings with him. Piranha Man.
Yeah,
he just had such great people. Just such a fun show.
Chicago. John Hancock, Steve and Gary. That's how far back those are the guys that really kind of launched part of my love of radio. And I got in.
Did you grow up in Chicago?
No. But I used to, as a kid living in Carolina, would listen to Chicago radio on the AM. And Larry Lujak is the guy who ignited the flame in my brain going, that's what I want to do.
Did you ever listen or did you ever know John Records Landecker?
Oh, yeah. Records Landecker. Yes.
So his daughter, Amy, and I went to high school together. We were at a small liberal arts high school across the street from Lincoln Park Zoo called Francis Parker. Ann H. was in our class. Jennifer Beals and Daryl Hannah graduated the year before we got there as freshmen.
Chicago was the best of all my years in New York, LA, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit. Chicago was the best. It was just the best of all worlds. I was 30, a lot of money, a lot of, on the radio, I was just
single.
Oh yeah. I didn't get married till just a couple of years ago. I was going to be that bachelor forever. And then I met Tammy and I was like, wait, there's normal, solid, salt of the earth.
Psychotic. You can trust them and build a good life together. Good for you.
Brad, I had a bad picker. That's all I'm going to say. I had a bad picker.
This has been an absolute joy, David. And I hope I can come back and do this with you again. And I'm glad to be at the top of your second year and congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. I'll get out of here and we will keep in touch.
Okay, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Man, Manischewitz. Was that a great time or what? Whew, that is worth the price of admission. Hey, wait, it was free. Rising Tiger, Brad Thor. What a delight. Whew, I think he's coming back. Right when you think it couldn't get any better, it does. On next week's show, guess who's going to be here? The one and only Dean Koontz. I know, I said the same thing. Pinch me, baby, pinch me. Is it real? Yes. The book is The Big Dark Sky, New York Times bestselling author
of 500 million copies.
On next week's show. That date, by the way, is 7/21. But anyway, you want to make sure you are here for Dean Koontz, The Big Dark Sky. And may I throw this at you while I'm still thinking about it? Have you had a chance to register to win your copy? I've got 2 of these, 2 copies of this book. to a lucky listener watcher who simply wants to have one. It's a 3-step process, real easy. Number 1, write an email. The email is thethrillerzone@gmail.com. Number 2, put in the subject line, I want Dean Koontz's book. And number 3, in the body of the email, tell me where you're writing from, what city, what state, what country, and why you want the book. That's it. thethrillerzone@gmail.com. Subject line, I want Dean Koontz's book. Number 3, this is where I'm writing for, and this is why I want the book. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Bing, bing, bing.
We're going to take all those names, put them in a fishbowl. My lovely, talented, brilliant wife, Tammy, is going to reach in, pull it out, and we'll have a winner. All right? So, get that to me now, and then we will announce the winner on the show. Once again, thank you to Brad Thor, Rising Tiger. Grab a copy today. It is a page-turner, white knuckler. And then join us next week for The Big Dark Sky with the ever-so-talented and nicest gentleman I have met in perhaps ever. I love my job. One last thing before I go. Another great big thank you to Warwick's Bookstores. They're based in La Jolla, California, not very far from where I live. They're a family-owned store. And you know what I love about them? Their customer service is unlike anything else you've ever seen. Yeah, they have the greatest selection of books ever. A lot of monographed by your favorite authors. But they've got great pens and leather goods and gifts. So if you're in and around the San Diego area, stop in. Tell them David Temple from the Thriller Zone sent you. They're going to take really good care of you. All right. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or Stitcher or Spotify or iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcast, or, of course, on thethrillerzone.com, leave us a review. 5 stars is pretty fantastic. I mean, if you're an author and you get a 5-star review, you're feeling pretty good, aren't you? We love the same thing. And it really does help the show. So thank you for your 5-star reviews. Thank you for your emails. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm David Temple, your host. We'll see you next time for another edition of The Thriller Zone.